Hello, my name is Isabella Dackley, and for my presentation, I will be doing the correlation between child abuse and marticide in South Africa. This is going to be our agenda for this presentation. So first, I will go into the background info of the topic, then I will go into my reasons and evidence, then I'll move on to my counterclaim and rebuttal, and finally, my conclusion. There's a saying that the abused becomes the abuser. This saying comes from actions in childhood becoming justified later in life. However, there are more extreme cases of lethal violence, specifically men murdering their spouses. In South Africa, 50.3% of female homicides are from IPV, or impending partner violence. This means that over half the women that are killed by someone that they love. When looking at these specific cases, there's a common theme between the perpetrators' childhoods. Marceline Misha was one of the experts to look into some of these childhoods, and in her results, she found that 88% of men were physically abused, 55% were neglected, 63% were emotionally abused, and 20% were sexually abused at least once in their childhood. This abuse has been shown to cause alterations in neurological pathways, and this can lead to psychological disorders such as PTSD. Considering this when looking at the stimulus material, source F, or predator-induced fear causing PTSD like changes in the brain and the behavior of wild animals, stuck out as a clear connection to this topic. A study done on the neurological effect of fear on animals, and the results were similar with humans. The results revealed an exposure to a natural cue of predator danger had enduring effects of at least 7 days, involving both heightened sensitivity to predator danger and elevated neurological activation in the amygdala and hippocampus. This showed that fear-induced situations cause changes in the brain that can lead to PTSD. Assuming that animal fears is the same as humans, it shows that abuse, being a fear-induced situation, causes the same neurological changes that can lead to psychological disorders. Not only that, but it changes the behavior of the animals and the humans. The behavior of those with psychological disorders acting out in fear can lead to very violent outcomes. This being such an issue in South Africa, many have tried using media to spread awareness as a solution, but this seemed to create more of a problem. The ones seeing violence in the media at many times were kids. Exposure to this violence as kids can desensitize a younger generation to violence, and it leads to the abuse becoming a cycle. Seeing this violence can also add fear and the eventual psychological disorders we looked at earlier. This only adds to the already damaged mental systems of these kids. All of this leads me to my thesis statement. To best prevent marticide caused by the abuse leading to psychological disorders, facilities must be created to rehabilitate the victims of child abuse and prevent further abuse. The first reason for this solution is mental facilities should be created for those who have suffered child abuse. These mental facilities have the ability to help victims find ways to work through their trauma before resorting to violence. Without solutions like this, violence is inevitable. This was proven in the article exploring the intersection between violence against women and children from the perspective of parents convicted of child homicide by Bianca Deckel. She explains the story of James, age 36 years old, who was abused as a child and an alcoholic father. He was convicted of murder of his stepson, aged 5 years old, whom he physically beat to death. She continues by explaining the abuse, saying James's mother passed away when he was 4 years old, and he battled to cope with the loss and seemed to have attachment issues. Fear of being abandoned by a partner and difficulty with emotional intimacy in relationships, he reported turning to violence with any of the women he had a sexual relationship with. Situations like these could have been prevented if the right resources were provided to overcome the mental trauma. Another article titled Altered White Matter Connectivity in Young People Exposed to the Childhood Abuse Tract-Based Spital Statistics, and the study said that further explains the facilities to help rewire the brain. This article explains how deep abuse actually affects the brain by saying, we found that childhood abuse is associated with altered microstructure of neural pathways connecting the limbic, temporal, and occipital visual regions. The second reason is that there should be easier ways to report abuse. The article, Medication Challenges for Patients with a Severe Mental Illness, Experiences with Views of Patients, Caregivers, and Mental Health Workers in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, explores some of the limitations for those who seek mental health. The author says that management of patients with mental disorders is inadequate in the majority of low and middle income countries. Patients may face challenges in meeting medication needs. In this context, higher percentages of individuals who seek mental health for their disorders are not treated. Whether it be low income or another reason, treatment should never be something that's out of reach, no matter what the reason. Furthermore, an article called Children, Violence, and the Media explores how the media is important for spreading awareness, but also has negative effects on those who view the violence. In this article, the author explains how much of an issue that this child abuse really is, saying, during a period of April 1st, 2004 to March 30th of 2005, 1,128 children were murdered, 189 were victims of assault with the intent coming from grievous bodily harm, 31,607 were victims of common assault, 22,468 were raped, as reported from the South African Police Force. Just media coverage might not be enough to save these victims before it's too late. This is why they need access to help. However, not everyone would agree with these opinions and claim that there may not be a chance for recovery after too much damage is done. They may also argue that some don't actually need help. Furthermore, this problem may not be able to be fully prevented. Finally, they could argue that these facilities will cost too much to create. But the importance for the victims of abuse to get help massively outweighs any of the claims that suggest that it's not needed. Violence in any kind can lead to lethal consequences and no one's life is worth that risk. These are my sources.
Where's your own defense? Okay. Great. How did some preliminary information you gathered inform your research?
So a lot of my research that was done changed over time based off of the research that was already gathered. For example, throughout my research, I had a broader topic of it not just being specifically for couples in South Africa, and I assumed that I could do it for America, because obviously me living in that demographic, I see the media from it, but I noticed as I was gathering more and more of my sources, I found that the demographic was all located in South Africa.
Okay. And what additional questions emerged from your research? Why are these questions important?
Right. Okay, so a lot of questions kind of emerged since this is a very large topic, and I've always been interested on why people do what they do, where is the violence coming from, and in a lot of my research there were a lot of questions that popped up of there could be other causes of people committing violence, and specifically child abuse was the overarching theme when it came to marticide in South Africa, but for other cases of murder there are obviously a lot of reasons why somebody would commit such a horrible crime, but there were a lot of questions that popped up that were, how does alcohol play into it, and substance abuse, for other reasons of murder, but for this specific question that had to do with marticide, it was child abuse the whole way. So there are other questions that could be explored, but this felt right for this scenario.
All right, thank you very much.